Sam in England.
Hi, Sam.
You're live with Eric and V. Hey.
Hello.
Hello. What would you like to talk about?
So I was kind of wondering what your two take on something was that I've been thinking about this week, in that I've been considering, and a lot of people I know who are atheists tell me that if God appeared to them, or if they had a super strong spiritual experience with God, referring to the Christian God, I'm polytheist, don't get me started on that, they would then believe. And I think that it's really interesting that they seem to have kind of a very Christianized idea of it, and a Christianized version of what that would mean. Some of them,
Well, what would mean? Can you clarify?
Yeah.
What is that?
So when I say a Christianized idea of it, they have this very specific idea of there is one God and he must have these attributes, and therefore if you can prove these attributes, you must know it, the whole omnipotence, omniscience.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's rather silly as well.
Yeah, that would not be my take. But.
Yeah, but I think that us arbitrating Facebook and Twitter arguments with people that aren't here isn't as productive. Is there something that you'd like to ask us or talk to us about? Or with us?
Sorry, that was... I'm sorry. Sometimes I ramble. I am getting to a point.
That was good clarification. What is the crux of this question for us?
That was what I was just about to say. I was wondering kind of what you guys thought would be a sensible criterion for that, because some people might just mean that they need some proof of it. And do you think there is a sensible proof of a God, or do you think?
Got it. So you're saying, if we're going to take the position that a God can prove that they exist by some kind of, manifestation in our world, what would that manifestation look like in order to prove to us that it was a God?
Yeah, or do you think that's even possible in the first place?
Right. I would say no, just because for me, I have been convinced that I've experienced God multiple times in different ways, both as a Christian and as somebody who was involved in Wicca for a while, which ended after a bit. And then I was in a pantheistic state where I was like, the universe is God and I'm experiencing the universe, therefore I'm experiencing God. And I have two problems with the concept of this in general. On the one hand, you can call anything God that you experience, and then on one level have experienced God, right? If you are telling me that the universe is God and you experience the universe, then yes, semantically you have experienced God, because that's how you're defining God. And I can't argue with that. I can just say, okay, I don't consider the universe God. So we're at a standstill in terms of definition. So I'm not necessarily saying that people have not had the experiences that they have. I'm saying I take issue with trying to pin a God label on it and make assumptions about what it could have been, as opposed to this is just an experience that I had. But on a deeper level, I like the phrase, sufficiently sophisticated technology or science is indistinguishable from magic, right? So I could potentially have an experience with something that I would consider God, either in a Judeo-Christian sense or in a pagan sense or whatever, but it could very just as easily be some form of technology or science that I just don't understand, or maybe tapping into some kind of biological or chemical thing that I don't understand, but that is still purely rooted in the natural, in science. So I think for myself, and I can't speak for anybody else, I would never ever say that I would have to experience God in order to know that God existed, because I don't think I don't think experience is a valid criteria for knowing what is or is untrue.
Yeah, we use each other to help us determine what is and isn't real about the world around us. And I'd love to dovetail in, but Sam, I wanted to give you the chance to respond before I did.
Fair enough. I mean, I think that is a sensible and certainly reasonable way to look at it. I obviously don't look at it that way. I am a theist, but I think that's certainly a sensible way of looking at it.
Yeah, I actually disagree with you.
Interesting. Okay.
So if you were to frame it in a completely naturalistic way and show me, then yeah, I'd agree. So let's use the Christian, concept of God, right? Maybe maybe one that our last caller would probably identify as God. So there are a lot of claims in the Bible, right? Claims that we can't reproduce, that don't seem possible. Spitting in somebody's eye and them being able to see doesn't seem like a thing that we can do. But if you wanted to show me that actually happened, then show me the method, right? Show me how to spit in somebody's eye so that they can see, right? I mean, when it comes to miracle healings or walking on water, right? If you were to, let's say, go back and I was to be there and Jesus was trying to show me, hey, here's how I walked on water. I've got this really cool device. Mm-hmm. I would be like, oh, cool. That's a thing that happened, because I would then be able to understand. If you were to couch those in naturalistic terms, right? If you were to go, hey, God is all powerful. And by all powerful, we specifically mean this, 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 and this. And then we could track it and go, you know what? Actually, that follows, right? If you want us to believe in resurrection, show us that resurrection is possible. And then we can determine whether or not that was probable. But if you can demonstrate the possibility of each of those claims, I think you could walk me there. It just needs to have, because there are a lot of claims.
Right, but then it becomes a question of, all right, are we talking about the supernatural anymore? And is the concept of God diminished for the theist if it is no longer supernatural?
But that's the thing, is killing the magic, I don't care.
Right, but I think that a lot of the time, well, we can ask Sam.
Sure.
A lot of the time, I feel like the supernatural element is an important part of it, and there would be a resistance to trying to claim a purely naturalistic version of quote unquote God. But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are here, Sam, and maybe you can share with us what you believe about gods, because you say you are a theist and you're calling in, so we'd love to hear a little bit more about what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So I'll preface this with, I'm a substance dualist, but I would consider whatever the spiritual side of things is to also be an extension of the natural world.
Okay.
And as such, I think any time that we think something's supernatural, it turns out there is a natural explanation for it. And with, say, a personal experience, be that a brain hiccup or whatever, or the gods influencing someone's brain, it is a physical thing. Therefore, anytime you can define something, it ceases to be supernatural. So I would posit that the gods are natural. Now, whether they're exactly as I would imagine them, disembodied consciousness is another matter.
Well, question. Disembodied consciousnesses would definitely be where we get off the train.
Right.
Can you demonstrate what a disembodied consciousness is or could be? I mean, I'd love to follow you there, but I need your help here. What is a disembodied consciousness?
Within the structure of my belief, I have some things that I kind of posit provisionally, that I think disembodied consciousness seems to be a fairly common thing that people get to. And in terms of how I would then imagine that, I don't think that I mentioned being a substance dualist, but I don't necessarily think that the other side of the dualism, the spirit side, I don't think things are necessarily having a physical body. I don't think they occupy space.
So then what's the point? That seems like a useless belief that's unfalsifiable. If there's no impact that this spirit or soul or whatever you want to call it, this disembodied consciousness has, then why have that at all?
So you guys would automatically distrust a personal experience. I have had, however, personal experiences that I would then go to.
Right.
Well, clarification there, just so you're aware, I would not distrust the fact that you had an experience or the fact that you interpreted it in a certain way. Whenever someone comes to me and says, I've had this experience, I accept automatically that they have that experience, because otherwise that would be a weird, no, you're lying. Why would they lie about that? Yes, you've had the experience. Yes, I agree with you that there was an experience that happened for the sake of the conversation. And I also accept what you think about the experience. Both of those things are not in dispute. What is in dispute is when people try and use their personal experience to make an ontological claim about something not directly connected to that experience. And that's where we generally start having these conversations.
And just for people following, that ontological claim is not it doesn't have to do with what you think. It doesn't have to do with what you think could be or should be, but what is.
Right. If you say, I experienced something, which is subjective, therefore something is, which is objective and outside of yourself, that would be making an ontological claim based on a personal experience, which is where we have the differentiation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can follow that. And I think I might have misspoken slightly in what I was just saying, because in terms of a sociological perspective, you presume someone isn't lying.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume you'd accept I had it. You would just beg to differ on the cause.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think we call that charitable listening. There we go.
Yeah.
We want to go into these conversations charitably and assume that the person that we're talking to is an honest interlocutor,
right,
and treat them as such.
Okay, so I will take one of my personal experiences, for example, that I had with Hermes. I'm a Hellenic Greek polytheist, and what he was wearing in his physical appearance was totally different to all the media I'd ever been exposed to. But I go and look, and it pretty much identically matches descriptions in things like the Iliad and the Homeric hymns and stuff, which is a bit of coupled with that being an extremely strong experience. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, okay, well, since it matches historical experiences, I'm going to associate this with the name Hermes. So there are certain things that are potentially attached to that. But
yeah. I think you're giving us why it's internally consistent given your worldview.
Yeah.
That's actually not convincing, right? Because somebody can give me an internally consistent worldview that still doesn't match with reality, right? Somebody can say, I believe that I'm a brain in a vat and that you're all just projections of my mind. They could be internally consistent in the way that they present that. That doesn't make what they're saying true. So I understand, and I'll actually grant you charitably, like we said, mm-hmm. that you are entirely internally consistent with your worldview, with how that seems to match up and all of that. How did you determine that that is actually shown in reality? Like how can... It's enough that you convinced yourself, sure, but we want you to convince us.
Okay, see, now there's where we might bump into problems, because I don't think you should be convinced by my personal experience.
Well, then...
Why are you convinced by your personal experience if somebody else wouldn't be? I mean, I know that inherently within personal experience is the personal, right? You experienced it, therefore it means something more to you than it does to us. But in general, personal experience, I would hold even my own personal experiences, and I have, as highly suspect if I couldn't then convey it in a way that would convince others.
Sam? Looks like we may have lost Sam.
No.
It looks like there is a connection, but no, they just dropped.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, but it looks like we were able to pop that line into the queue, so hopefully if Sam comes back, we can talk to them again.
And again, like I can't speak for Eric, of course. I love this kind of conversation. I love talking about gods other than the Judeo-Christian one, even though that God gets particularly large amounts of airtime. So if you believe in other gods, like, call in. Love to hear it.
Absolutely.